અહીંયા તમારું ખૂબ સ્વાગત છે on behalf of Sir Prabhashankar Patni Open Window Charitable Trust and the Patni Archives team. I hope બધાએ ચા અને ગાંઠિયા સારી રીતે માણ્યા and I hope you liked our Bhavnagar delicacy. હવે અમે 16 ને 17 ડિસેમ્બરે we opened the exhibition, the public launch of Patni Archives, and then it felt it was important to have some conversations around the subjects that were curated. કે એક સ્ટેટિક ડિસ્પ્લે ના થઈ જાય, લોકો આવીને જોઈને જાય, ત્યાં અમુક વિઝિટર્સ આવે તો એમની સાથે ચર્ચાઓ થાય, પણ to involve community members from Bhavnagar and outside felt like an important element of the opening of the archives. કે અમુક એવા conversations શરૂ કરીએ કે જેના લીધે આ આખું જે આર્કાઇવિંગની પ્રોસેસ છે કે કમ્યુનિટી સાથે કામ કરવાના જે પ્રોસેસીસ છે એનું રેલેવન્સ શું છે ને આજે પ્રેઝન્ટમાં કેમ જરૂરી છે. So to bring that about, we decided that we will do a set of community conversations today, and I'm grateful to all the guest speakers who will also be joining us through the day, that at such short notice they all agreed to visit our exhibition as well as be here for the discussions. Now I will hand over to Ishita Shah, our curator and moderator for the first panel, to introduce the guest speakers and take forward the first conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Avni. I should clarify that I'm stepping in for Dr. Tana Trivedi, who's been one of the curatorial members, co-curator and researcher, who's not been able to join us due to some unfortunate situations. So I'll do my best to fill in her shoes, but if I'm not able to, please excuse me for that. Avni's already introduced me, so I'll move on to what we are going to talk about in the first session. The first session's been dedicated to the conversation around relevance of family legacies. So before we move on to the second and the third session, which is going to be really about community experiences, even at the level of building family legacies and studying the material that we have in terms of its relationship across land, culture, and politics, subjects which are much more, I think, closer to the work also that Dr. Tana Trivedi has been pursuing over the last few years. How is that important, or rather, how does that get informed through the study of family histories or family material? One of the questions, or few of the questions that I had put out for our speakers and panelists was, and I think in summary, what I was really asking is that, do these micro histories matter when we think about something as macro as cities or a region and its development? So when we're studying the papers, I can be more specific also, when we're reading and looking into papers of Sir Patni or the administrative work that had been going on, they have made certain reforms which were timely in that period, in that era. When we start interpreting it, it feels like, oh, but then why isn't it talked about now again? For example, there are conversations and initiatives around free education, something which seems it could have been, if it had happened, it could have been going on, and that's something because literacy or conversations around education have been going on for a very long time in the country. So why is it that it stopped in that moment, or is it something that could be revoked when we think about the urban development and future urbanism of our cities? And that doesn't need to stop at the boundaries of Bhavnagar or Kathiawad, because those questions come up when we look at city and development, whether it is Ahmedabad, whether it is Bombay, or what's going on across the world in that sense. So this was just one example of the kind of histories that are coming about in what we are right now looking at as a family history or a family archive. But the material seems to sort of vibrate across regions and scales. So with this, I would just leave it with the question that I'm asking, or rather we have posed here, that what would be the relevance? Are there values of development, fair administration, representation that can be sort of mulled over, reinterpreted, talked about even in today's times when we are looking back at historical documents. And I think we've got the right combination of panelists to speak with us from very different fields on the subject matter. I will now hand it over to the co-moderator, Astha Pandya, to introduce our panelists one at a time, and then we'll hear your thoughts on these questions. I think I would also want to invite the audiences on YouTube. If you're listening to us live and there's something that provokes you, drop a question in the comments, and we'll try our best to catch up on your questions or at least share them with our panelists through the day.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll apologize for my voice first. I'm going to be introducing the panelists for today. So first, we have Dr. Sonal Mithal. Dr. Sonal Mithal is an architect who works on the conservation of architectural heritage sites, interested in design sensibilities that encourage user experience as a strategy for effective presentation on heritage sites. From that perspective, a critical understanding of human movement and hence movement as a design tool led her to explore performance studies. She has conducted workshops with performance and visual artists from the Vishwabharati University at a site of river erosion at Shantiniketan, India, to explore the significance of the body as a medium to represent landscape.
Thank you, Ishita. Thank you, Astha. Thank you, Avni, for inviting me. Can you go back? Okay. So I know, Ishita, I know I have 10 minutes, but it might be a little longer. Just stop me when it's 10 minutes. I'll stop immediately. So I am very much interested in this question of archives, and but then what is in my presentation is how do I access the archive and how my work has also problematized the archive as an institution and the fact that it can be highly hegemonic. So, but then also like Ishita's work and, you know, the work that you guys have been doing, talking about micro histories is also an exercise of also critically accessing what is in the archives and bring out the histories and the narratives that are not yet known or which also subvert the mainstream history. So what I will present are 3 projects. The first project is a book project, which is an ongoing project, which is treating the colonial archive. It is accessing the colonial archive and it subverts it on its head. So we are reading the same archive but bringing out a different meaning. The second project is an art project which we did for the metro in Ahmedabad, in the 4 stations in the heritage city of Ahmedabad, in the underground metro. We made large-scale displays of artwork which are derived from the archives of Ahmedabad. So that is one project. And the third project is a conservation project in Surat, the Surat Castle, in which we actually, the archives is the building itself. So the idea of the archive is not just an enclosed room with, you know, documents and things like that, but the building, and for us architects, sometimes the building itself becomes the archive. So how do we read that and how that can contribute to the creation of new histories? So yeah, the 3 projects and basically research, art and value-based practice. They all come from archives. So the first project is this book, which a colleague of mine, Arul Paul, he teaches in Mangalore. Him and I, we are writing about history of Lucknow. And the architectural history of Lucknow has always been written about in a highly condescending manner, that it is strange, it's queer, it's vulgar, it's debased, and hence we should not write about the architectural history of Lucknow and we should not study about it. So these kind of things we came across these things in several books, especially history of architecture books, and who are architectural students, they would know that Bannister Fletcher, Percy Brown, these are the history books, James Ferguson. And these books have actually said Lucknow architecture is bad. So we tried to see why there is, in the archives, in the colonial archives, there is so much of repetition of this thing that Lucknow architecture is bad. And we are like, why is that happening? And we realize through the book, and that's what we want to like. Um, so these are some instances of the archival material, and it might be too small to see, but several instances which are highlighted in the description say that the worst form of architecture you would see in Lucknow. And that is something that is repeated in the archives. So this is on the top, it's like, so they don't just say bad things about the architecture, they also say bad things about the builders. And they say Nasiruddin Haider reign was really a period of danger. There was maladministration in the country. He was never free from his debaucheries and his invented religious rites and so. And there is just, it goes on and on. He spoke like a woman, dressed like a woman. Can you? And it just goes on. So, so we try to understand what's happening, and it is. So what was happening is that the British wanted to take over Lucknow, and they had to make a case. They wanted to take over Awadh, and they wanted to make a case that, hey, these guys are not worth it, and so give us the administration. So to make a case, they construct this archive. They write and produce these documents. So the archive is never a natural piece of work or a natural or honest form of historical documentation. It's a constructed documentation. All the mongrel vulgarities were applied in this Corinthian plasters, false Venetian blinds, imitation marbles, pea green mermaids sprawling over. So this thing. So they use words like mongrel vulgarities to write about architecture. And interestingly, if you trace the history itself, you will see that these are precisely the buildings that British took over. One of the kiosks from Lucknow, from exactly this palace, is sitting in the Frigmore Gardens of Windsor Castle. They literally took it. If it's vulgar mongrel vulgarities, why did you take it? But they took it, right? And if it's so bad, then why did you appropriate? So they eventually appropriated the whole of the garden palaces and distributed it to their, subordinates and so on and so forth. So, but what is very interesting is that they use the pretext of the Nawab's body and how their culture and also the architecture to make a case that it's weak administration. So we are contesting that claim in our book by accessing the colonial archive itself. So we are looking at 3 sites. 3 Nawabs, Asaf-ud-Daula and Nasiruddin Haider and Wajid Ali Shah. And the 3 sites are related, Machi Bhavan, Badshah Bagh and Kesar Bagh. We are accessing colonial archives, made the travelogues, the letters that they wrote back home, the dispatches that were used to communicate between the Governor General and his subordinates, the residents and all that. Historical accounts, commissioned paintings, maps, photographs, and newspapers. So these are the archives. Then we are also, to counter it, we are also looking at very far and few archives that the Nawabs commissioned, which were like their poetry, their memoirs, paintings, and newspapers, and some of the contemporary scholarship that has started to question the colonial project. So we are, the method is that we are querying the archive. We are using another, the method of subverting the archives is drawing upon queer theory. And in that subversion, we are reconstructing a new archive. So something that has been erased in the colonial archive, we are recreating all that. So that is the method. And it's rewriting a new history. And these are the ways in which we are using the imagery which we find from the colonial archive, the maps and photographs and things like that. And, twisting, turning, superimposing on each other, we are able to construct a whole lot of precinct. Like if you can see here, this part, you can see it's all plain ground. It was actually all erased, this thing. But reading all these imageries, we have been able to actually give a footprint of what this place was. So that is what we are saying by when we say reconstructing erasures. And this is a method that we keep following a little bit in a greater detail, that we are even able to draw like double lines of what the building footprint was. And then we are making it into, and these are the kind of drawings that the Nawabs commissioned. So drawing upon these to counter the colonial archive. We are also looking at some of the text that was written, and it's very interestingly, like on the right hand side you see a Hindi translation of Wajid Ali Shah's own writing, which was called the Ishaqnama, which you see on the left hand side. And Parikhana, it translates to Awadh ke Aakhri Nawab ki Rangeen Dastan. It's like one of the cheap books that are meant for, entertainment, like cheap entertainment. So it was being, perpetuated. His life and his take on culture and his, the court culture was pervaded into the people as if it's cheap and so on. So we use that kind of a work to then understand what exactly is happening. So basically, again, repeating the thing that something in the archive, we don't take it at face value, and we see it in the context of what's happening. Imagery, which has been written about, but we also are making a case that it was inclusive. We see Wajid Ali Shah. Wajid Ali Shah was not, by the contract, he could not keep an army. It's like because they had done a deal with the British. But what he does is he trains, he gets himself painted as if he's training the army, and the army is shown as white guys. So even if he can't, he gets himself presented like that. That is his, that is his aspiration. And that is what he wants his people to know him as. So with whatever least agency that he had, he still wanted to assert himself. And so these are the various kinds of gardens that he commissioned and all that, and which is what was called vulgar and all that. And these are some of the kiosks and things that were taken back to Frigmore, this thing. So, and then the looting. After the 1857 uprising, Wajid Ali Shah was sent to Kolkata, and there was heavy war that happened in the premises of Kaisarbagh. And there was these imageries that appear in the colonial archive, which is about the looting. It's very interesting if you see that the people who are looting are brown men. And the person who's standing there is a white guy who's dressed in, this thing. And he's Russell. He's the Times correspondent. And if you read, he says, I was not participating in the looting. The looting was happening by somebody else, and I was just given the loot. I did not want the loot, but I was just given. So it is also like, again, making a case that we have nothing to do. If we have everything that has been looted from India and gone there, it just because somebody gave it to us. So these kind of cases they are making. The archives is being used to construct a history, and that is what we are highlighting in this thing through our book. The second project is this artwork we did for the metro rail in Ahmedabad. 4 stations we did. Kalupur, Kankaria, Kalupur, Shahpur, and Ghikata. And so for each of the places, we again dug into the archives and saw what is very specific to it. So in Kalupur, at the site of, at Kalupur and at Ghikata, we did 2 things. One is on the side of the metro line, and on Kalupur, at least it's the fast track, that high-speed rail. So there was a factory which was brought down to have the rails. Incidentally, we had images of that in our archives. So we drew this artwork. This is Ghikata. Same thing we did. Metropolitan Court building was there. It got demolished because the metro had to come in. So from old imagery, we derived these artworks and made that. And as a memory, that all right, we have to move on. Let's have the memory of what was there. And in that, we celebrate the history of the place. And it becomes public. So this is totally developed. On the right-hand side, you see the old, we exaggerate things and we have like, drawn this drawing from imagery, from fragmented images, or what the court building would have been like. The same thing we did for the factory site in Kalupur. And the third project is this conservation project. I think Anjani had worked on it for a while. And so again, it received the Cultural and Economy Smart City Award in 2019 also, and it is still going on. It has been in 3 phases. So what is very interesting about this project, I will not go into it, will take a very long time, but it's not a simple building. It is a building which has seen a series of constructions, and we have 2 intentions. One is to treat the building as its own archive. We will read the building, what it is telling us about its construction history, and we will highlight it. And the second thing is that we want the people to get familiarized about architectural history, not through books, but through the building. And so you read, how we are reading the building, because of our expertise, we want to make it open to the people so that they also read it the same way. So I'll just skip, and then we did have a lot of archival maps. We also saw a lot of archival imagery. Like we got 1:200 drawings of castle from 1881, and these are things that kept on emerging as we are constructing. So sometimes we do the conservation and information appear later, but there is always a going back and forth about these aspects. They're like everyday ledger records related to the castle because it was on the port. Let's move on. So these kind of ledgers were available. And again, like 1:200 drawing of the castle again, very detailed, which has been instrumental in also deciding which layer of history do you go back to while you're conserving, because it is not possible to go back to an original moment because all moments in history have been very important. So that complexity, this layered building, when it becomes archival, it brings us that complexity, and we wanted to retain that complexity. I'll not again go into the details. So you can see like here, when we say the building is its own archive, several kinds of mortar mixes and the brick sizes tell us they belong to a different time period and a different construction system. And at places, we have kept it open and highlighted it as a form of presentation, such that when people see it, they are able to see the difference. So yeah, I'll just keep moving. This one is a good example in which you see in the yellow, it's the Tughlaq brick and the British brick on the top. The same wall has it. And that is how we have kept it open. And this is not something that was any time a known form of history. It is not recorded anywhere. It's only the construction system that tells us that it is possible, that it may have been constructed in. Yeah, these are the kinds of underground tanks, 4-story down tanks we've discovered on site. Like more discoveries that were all buried. This was another fortification which we found. Nobody knew that there was the earlier fort was strengthened by another fort with like 24 feet wall. Actually, it's huge. You can see that. So what we did is, in the next thing, we opened it up so that you can move around. And so that is like bringing the knowledge about architecture and what the building told us that, hey, these are 2 layers of construction. You open it like a volume so that people can move around it. You can see in this area that this part is opened up. So you can see this inner construction. And then this was the outer one that was created to strengthen it. So when you walk through it, you will see both the sides. So in that sense, conservation also becomes an agency in reading the archive and bringing it to people. It's a design exercise. Yeah. So this is what we created, like, a walk. And then the strengthening and everything is like contributing to the experience of the people. Yeah, I think more findings and, I think there are more such examples like about the moat and all that, but I think we can skip it. Huh? Yeah, I think we can just run through and I think we are done. I think it's fine. All right, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mithal. Next, I would like to introduce Saman Quraishi. She is an architect and further trained as a historian who currently works as an assistant archivist at CEPT University. She is an active new professional of the International Council of Archives and a part of new professional program 22-23. Her professional undertakings and endeavors are situated at the confluence of archival research practice. She believes in creative, integrative, and transversal use of archives. She holds a Master of Architecture degree with a major in History Theory Criticism from CEPT University, Ahmedabad. Her current research explores ways in which architectural archives shape themselves and become entry points for negotiating the complexities of architectural history. Her interest and focus lie in organizing and curating archival collections to enhance discoverability, accessibility, and inclusivity.
Thank you, Astha. Thank you, Ishita, Avni, and everyone here for inviting and for, I've been telling Ishita that to have discursive platforms where we talk about archives and we look at archives, while Sonal did a fantastic presentation on how archives are constructed, how she problematized the construction of the archives, archives as sites of scholarship and archives as sites of practice. What I would like to bring in is some of the works that we do at the CEPT Archives. And the larger theme that I would want to connect is, and I want to talk about is the interconnectedness in the archives we work with. And the entanglement of learnings and logics that goes into the construction or into the curating of the archives. As we all know, there are, and I'm going to going to talk about the interconnectedness to some of the examples that exist at the archives that I work with. Also, if you can go back, Sombay. And this is of course not a comprehensive listing of the parameters that interconnects of what we see at the archives. A lot of material that we see at the archives is often in plain sight, and I have to tell you here that I'm not a trained archivist like many of us here. I'm trained as an architect and then further as an architectural historian. So when I work at the archives, I'm not working as a researcher, but as somebody who's arranging the material to be able to, for a researcher to come in or for somebody to come in to be able to discover what is in the archives. So my job at hand is to make sure the material is discoverable and sort of the layers that are in the archives are visible enough when somebody is coming into the archives. Coming back to the interconnectedness of the archives, and which I picked up because it is interesting to see how the conversations on microhistories, how the conversations of what are the possibilities hidden in the archives and what are the how to not make it reductive but make it more make it still publicly engaging, other things which then all relates to the interconnectedness of the material that exists in the archives. So some of the parameters that interconnects the material are of course the region, the time, the accessibility, the ruptures in the archives, and the kind of care given to the archives, the anticipation of what they will be used at, and the usability. And of course, much more sensitive topics of what is the kind of privilege that is that the archives or the material that has come up with. Somebody next. So this is some of the collection snippets from the archives that I work with, and these are some of the drawings from the collections that we have. So what is happening here is that you see all of this looks very different. I'm not going to delve deeper into this and run you very quickly, and maybe we can open it up for the question answers later. What happens is that this has been collected over 10 years at the CEPT Archives. And when we look at these collections, some of the collections are coming from the practitioners that are, most of them are architects, and some of them are structural engineers, and some of them have been teaching architecture. So when I look at these are all connected through, of course, nature of work, and the way, so for example, if we see the picture down below, which is the travel photograph from the Chopadamsi collection, and then I go back to some of the collection that is Sathe's collection, they're all, they reveal a certain kind of interconnectedness in terms of relationship of the time. Yes, the previous one. No, sorry, go ahead, yeah. So let me pick up specific examples of what is happening in one of the collection that we have. This is some of the documents from the Jhapwala collection, CSR Jhapwala collection. And CSR Jhapwala was an architect based in Delhi and working in the post-independence era at the archives. This are the commissioning documents of a residence, which was commissioned around 1963. Now, when we look at these documents in plain sight does not reveal much. But when I actually look into these documents and connect with the drawings, I could understand the kind of administrative and kind of architectural landscape of the city, as well as what I'm trying to pull out here is how we arrange the collection so that these kind of information is revealed. But of course, as an archivist, I'm not sitting and researching on these material, but trying to reveal the information that is available at the archive. So somebody can come in and pull out the material and make it a site of scholarship, or contest that these are the things that not necessarily conform to the ideas or the arguments that they're trying to make in terms of understanding about the architectural landscape of the country at that time. So some of these documents also includes the bill of quantities, the schedule of rates happening at that time. So this is one example. If I go back to the next and hold on to this example, Sombai, next. And this is again drawings from this same collection, which are the drawings of the temporary structures that is happening in the capital city, which is the MMTC pavilion. Same collection, but two very different trajectories that the collections have been taking. Documents that looks very humble, but tells you what is happening, what is the kind of municipality and bureaucratic approach that is happening, and then some of the other same collection that tells what is happening when a country is trying, just after independence, trying to project themselves project themselves as a progressive nation with these kind of drawing. So what I'm trying to also pull out here is just the information that is in the plain sight but is not revealed. But we are trying to arrange the material in a format that these information, through descriptions, through their arrangement, gets revealed and gets used by somebody who's coming at the archives. This is again very humble looking and very it's not making sense to one person, who's looking at the drawings. This is a contact sheet from a very recent collection that came to the archives, which is Zidi Contractors collection, and she has been working in a very different geography up in Himalaya, up in the north, in Sidbadi, and she's not a trained architect, but she has been producing and practicing architecture in a very different manner. what is happening here is these are the contact slides from a very significant work that she did as an interior designer for a palace, for Udaipur Palace. Now, what this reveals is what is a kind of when someone is not trained as an architect, they are producing certain elements that have been used and that also have been so important for the collection that it takes place and becomes a part of the collection. These are some of the furniture that she designed for this, and if we look closely, we can understand what are the sensibilities of interior design that emerged during the time when Art Deco was at its prime. And this again, it's in the same timeline when Chhapwala was working actually way further, but when I connect the Chhapwala's very humble looking documents and the MMTC drawings that we just saw, which is a temporary structure, and this, what gets revealed is that there is a certain understanding of the larger landscape or understanding of smaller micro histories that can be revealed through these documents. I'm not the person who's revealing these things, but I'm just trying to facilitate, or rather we at the archives are trying to facilitate these kind of narratives through the kind of arrangement and through the descriptions that we are trying to do. Sohamai. This is again another collection that is 5,000 images in a collection, which if we were to look at doesn't make much sense to a person. This is just a collection of images. What do I do with it? But why it becomes important in an architectural archives, because if someone he's trained as an architect. He was at Bartlett at some point, Cho Padamsi, and he went around the world capturing different forms of architecture. And when you look at these images, what it reveals is, and if I were to sort of research on it, what it reveals is the kind of timeline that is, as an archival material, the kind of timeline, the way buildings have evolved, the kind of subjectivity that he's bringing into this material gets revealed in this collection. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, while the material looks humbling and looks just a set of pictures, when you deep dive into the material and when you see the kind of arrangement that happens at the archives, you understand there are certain kind of layers that could be picked up and that could be used to be able to understand larger narratives of the profession, larger narratives of how the architectural education is evolved, because he was also using these images and slides into how into his teaching. He was teaching urban design, and he was using these kind of very humble pictures taken going around the city and using these cities. So these are the kind of narratives get reveals in a very simplistic looking archives. Next, please. I would also like to point out that there's not only the boring material that you just saw at the archives. There's very interesting and mixed bag of materials that are there at all the archives. I'm sure that there are material that when you look at them, just do not make much sense to them, and we don't know, and we know this, that we don't sort of tag the material as other and miscellaneous, because those are the words that we don't use, but there's a lot of other interesting material that connects to those humble looking material and makes these revelations, make this interconnectedness much more interesting. So of course there's some absolute digital material, but each of these material, irrespective of the nature of the material, be it a drawing and be it just a picture, reveals much more information that is in plain sight. And again, coming back to and reiterating that through different kinds, through arrangements, through the kind of dissemination, and through the kind of through the kind of people that works with the archives, what we are trying to also do is to make sure that these kind of narratives, micro histories, larger, as we call it, long durays is a long shot, but these kind of histories gets revealed and starts emerging from the archives. Yes. I would just end with the last slide. The boring material looks like this, and then it looks very, very neat when we put them in the archive. So the material. A lot of people have told us that, you know, what do we do with these? What do we do with this? With this, it's just papers. But just to reiterate that. Fascinating things and important things can happen from the material. We spend a lot of time in making sure that these materials and these histories are not missed out and revealed in the archives. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Saman. For the next panelist, I'd like to invite Nisheeth Mehta. Nisheeth Mehta established Microsign products in 1979. His approach to human engineering has enabled him to achieve maximum efficiency while mostly employing differently abled people. He also hosts a number of cultural events throughout the year in Bhavnagar, bringing the best of classical art forms to Bhavnagar. And he is involved with most art centers and cultural institutions across the country.
Panelist અને બેન અવનીબેન, ખાસ કરીને અવનીબેન के द्वारा जो आर्काइव्स के लिए जागृत करने का एक कोशिश किया है वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा है, क्योंकि वर्तमान को सुधारने का है तो पास्ट हिस्ट्री को रिफर करना बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि पास्ट हमको कुछ सोचने का ढंग देता है कि हमें क्या करना चाहिए, कैसे करना चाहिए और क्यों करना चाहिए. Each and every person should have the objective of life for what they have come over this planet. Not only education is to make a person more sensible and a better human and better citizen. Only for the discussion, it should not be a question mark, but it should become a pure effort to reach to the smallest people in the country, and how that will be useful, and we can make our society more society friendly, disabled friendly, cultural friendly, and living life with the true satisfaction, not because of material or not because of money. Money and material should become useful only for the whatsoever we can find it comfortable. Otherwise, we are supposed to become trustee of our every kind of wealth. For that, it is not required to have NGO, but you can become the trustee of your every kind of wealth for using for our country, for our city, to make people more sensible, as well as they should be aware about what they should do and how they should do. So everybody in culturally, and even nature has made everybody total full of variety of wealth. We have to find out our ABC to give something back to the society in the way what you can do. Nobody is like that कि कोई भी ऐसा नहीं है कि जिसके पास कुछ नहीं है. सबके पास कुछ न कुछ पड़ा ही है, मगर देने का इच्छा होना चाहिए. देने के लिए हमारे पास सोच होनी चाहिए. देने के लिए सबको कुछ पैसादार बनाया है, वेल्दी बनाया है. हमें कुछ न कुछ देने का कोशिश करना चाहिए. और देने के लिए कोशिश करने के लिए मेरे को ऐसा लगता है कि जो पटनी आर्काइव्स में जो कलेक्शन हुआ है उसमें आई विल बी ऑल्सो फीलिंग वेल टू गेट हाउ our state was wealthy enough in वो देने का ही कोशिश किया है. तो it was the first in the country that they have given back to the India. गांधी जी को, सरदार पटेल को पहला देने का कोशिश किया है, वो भावनगर ने ही किया है. तो उसी में से हमें क्या समझना है कि हम क्या दे सकते हैं. तो उसके कारण मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये पटनी आर्काइव्स में खास करके what is the important of culture कि कल्चरली वेल्दी बनाने के लिए क्या क्या उसमें सोच है, वो मेरे को ढूंढना पड़ेगा और वो उसके साथ मुझे वाकिफ बनना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि कल्चरली वेल्दी है, दे आर द ट्रू वेल्दी पीपल। ओनली मनी से या मटेरियल से वेल्दी है, वो वेल्दी नहीं है। वेल्दी ऐसा होना चाहिए कि जिसमें से वो व्यक्ति की सुगंध आती है और उसमें फ्रेग्रेंस आती है। यू शुड लिव द लाइफ in a such a way so that you can become useful to your country people or people of your city, and you can become a giver's personality. So उसके लिए ये पटनी आर्काइव्स में क्या क्या कलेक्शन है उसमें से मुझे जानना, it would be my very thirstiness to know about the past and to know that and to become more rich by knowing these all things. तो जो जो बहन ने, अवनी बहन ने जो उसका प्रयत्न किया है, उसको मैं बहुत दिल से मैं उनको विश करता हूँ कि वो इसको आगे लेके जाए, और छोटे छोटे चीज़ में जैसे कल्चर के लिए क्या किया है, आर्ट के लिए क्या किया है, या आर्ट एंड कल्चर के लिए क्या है, अच्छा ह्यूमन बनाने के लिए क्या है, अच्छे बिजनेस को, बिजनेस कैसा एथिकल वैल्यूज़ के साथ बिजनेस कैसे करना चाहिए, उसके लिए क्या किया है, तो उसके ऊपर छोटी छोटी बुक या उसका कुछ मिलेगा, तो आई थिंक दैट विल बी अ good guidance to the people of Bhavnagar and people of India. It is not about the people of Bhavnagar, but that can give guidance to the people of India also. Because ये यहाँ जो भावनगर में जो किया है, इट वॉज अ वेरी नोबल थॉट के साथ किया हुआ है, और जो नोबल थॉट के पास साथ किया हुआ चीज़ है, वो अकेले भावनगर के लिए नहीं हो सकती है। इट इज़ फॉर द इंडिया, कंट्री ऑफ इंडिया। और ऐसा लगता है कि उसी में जितना भी कुछ काम करेंगी, तो मेरे ख्याल से उनको जो भी कोई सथवारा चाहिए, तो माइक्रोसाइन विल बी ऑलवेज लाइक टू सपोर्ट दिस आर्काइव्स का जो इनिशिएटिव लिया है, उसको हृदयपूर्वक मैं अभिनंदन देता हूँ। एंड जो अपना जो आर्किटेक्चर के बारे में जो दोनों बहनों ने जो भी कुछ प्रोड्यूस किया है, दैट ऑल्सो सेज अस अ लॉट दैट ये कैसी कैसी प्रकार का कंस्ट्रक्शन इज नॉट ओनली अ कंस्ट्रक्शन, बट दैट कैन गिव यू अ वाइडर थिंकिंग imagination about that kind of thinking, because of keeping in mind in all sorts of way. It is a good construction will give you a long way good thinking also, because आप कैसे रहते हैं उसका आधार के तुम्हारा सोच बदल सकता है। तो इसीलिए द आर्किटेक्चर कैन हेल्प यू टू, आप जो स्थान पर है उस स्थान पर से ऊपर कैसे उठाया जाए, उसका आपका सोच क्या है, उसी के लिए ये बहनों ने जो हमको जो वाकिफ किया है, उसकी मदद लेके हम उसको भी आगे लेके जा सकते हैं, क्योंकि सोच को बदलो, दुनिया बदल सकती है। आशा रखता हूँ कि मैं यहाँ ज़्यादा सुनने के लिए आया हूँ। आई लाइक टू कंट्रीब्यूट इन द एरिया ऑफ स्पोर्ट्स, आई लाइक टू कंट्रीब्यूट द इन एरिया ऑफ द स्काउट एंड गाइड्स, and I like to contribute in the area of culture, because if you are culturally rich, then everything is rich. Culturally contribution is very much necessary, क्योंकि वो culturally है, culture has direct connection with the person, people. If they are good enough, they are satisfied people, they can start giving something back to the society. And then otherwise, if you are not culturally rich, कितना भी आप पैसादार हो, तो उसकी आपकी तरस छिप नहीं जाएगी। तो इसके लिए सोच होनी चाहिए कि हम किसके लिए यहाँ ये धरती पर आए हैं, भावनगर की धरती पर। भावनगर की धरती पर का कुछ सोच के साथ यहाँ आए हैं, क्योंकि भावनगर की धरती भाव वाली धरती है और देने के लिए आते हैं, और हमेशा कुछ लेना है तो कुछ ज़्यादा देना भी है, ऐसा सोच वाले लोग ही भावनगर की धरती पर जन्म लेते हैं। आशा रखता हूँ कि आपका जो इनिशिएटिव है उसमें आप बहुत आगे बढ़े। ऑल द बेस्ट टू यू एवरी।
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Dr. Amol Agarwal. Amol Agarwal is an assistant professor of economics and public policy at Ahmedabad University. He is currently teaching economics at Ahmedabad and has work experience of nearly 10 years, mostly spent during doing economic research in financial sector. His papers, articles, and and presentations are published in different platforms, and his long-standing research on history of private banking in South Canara district, with a key focus on Mangalore and Udupi, has been recently published in the form of a self-authored book.
Yeah, thank you, thanks Avni and the Patni family for building this very interesting, and thanks for having me. Tana is not here, and me and Tana have been working on this paper. Uh, just as Sir was pointing out, and Sonal and Saman, the presentations were made, and I'm more of a user of archives. And it's always been this dream to publish a book, publish a monograph, and one way archivists and people who make archives and people who help us use those archives, the two of them here, is that people like me get to sort of write a book on using material from these archives and trying to talk about banking history and organizational history and so on. So my interests primarily have been around understanding how banks evolve, how organizations evolve, and so the interest essentially as an economic student, this though there was a discussion that in when you're doing an architectural study, there is some element of history, but in most economics courses, history is more or less absent. So that's been another. But at Ahmedabad University, we've been trying to introduce history to students, because as Sir was mentioning, history is extremely important. It helps us understand many things. As somebody who spent a fair bit of time looking at financial markets in Mumbai, and I was there when this 2008 financial crisis happened, and at that time a lot of references were made to the history, that in order to understand why banks are failing, you need to go back in history, right? So that's the first time I kind of began to understand as a professional that history is very important, and I started reading, which culminated into many things. And today, I'm giving a lecture on, so not really a trained historian, not somebody who is anyway connected to studying history formally, but purely out of passion, purely out of interest to understand the financial markets and the way and why is it that SBI is SBI, why is it Bank of Baroda is Bank of Baroda, and why is it that South Canara produced so many banks. So for that sort of an inquiry, one has to use archives, one has to have people like someone who help us understand and make. So I was happy. I kind of use RBI archives at Pune, which are very interesting, and also spoke to a fair bit of bankers and so on and so forth, oral history, tried to understand that how these places became. And as Sonal was mentioning about architectural history, it's also very interesting. As one is talking to different people, you realize that most of us have been to Mumbai here perhaps, and if you go to Fort, where a lot of these banks existed, and you go to Bandra Kurla complex where the modern banks are, and so the architectures of the two are very different, right? The older banks had this very fort sort of a structure because they wanted to give a sense of security, right? I mean, that people can't escape from this bank, you can't loot this bank. So this architectural history and the way you go on designing, all these things are deeply interconnected as you go on, looking at different things. I just want to, spend some time because we've been using the fascinating Patni archives to understand the evolution of a very interesting organization, a banking organization, the Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank, which very interestingly, though Bank of Baroda does come to our discussion, it's still a very eminent, prominent bank, but it's very interesting that Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank actually emerged before Bank of Baroda. It's the first princely state bank in the country, and again, I didn't know about it despite spending, because Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank is not there, it's not even taught, but these archives gave us some information, actually a lot of information, and I'm here to hopefully find more and produce this into something more interesting. So we presented this paper at IIM Ahmedabad in their business history conference. Avni was there, and what comes across when you're documenting the Bhavnagar Savings Bank, it is a sort of a different entity because it is set up by the Darbar. by the under the guidance of Prabhashankar Patniji. And as you are reading these things, you realize that how ahead of times these guys were. That's something which comes across, because you were, even at that time, you're documenting things. So this administrative reports of Bhavnagar state, they start documenting about the emergence of the bank, and those reports become very useful because you get a sense of how this bank is evolving as an institution. What is the purpose of this bank, and how is this bank evolving? So it gives you, in this Indian banking history, there are banks emerging in two. One is this British India, where this Mangrove Udupi region were also there, and then there is this princely states, which is like a separate entity. And several of these princely states set up their banks, of which Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank is the first. So which is itself quite a history. Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank on its own deserves a special mention in Indian banking history for being the first princely state bank and the way it was organized. And obviously this, as I'll go and point out in the later slides, it also gave a sort of a platform. It also gave a kind of a prototype for other princely state banks to set up their own banks going forward. Right. So all this material we get from the Patni archives through multiple records. Apart from the administrative reports, there are clippings, the letters being exchanged with the Patni family and Sardar Patel, and so on and so forth. So again, this art of firstly putting up the archive together, then somebody making that archive accessible, and then researchers like me coming in and trying to figure out how do you put this jigsaw puzzle together. Right? Because these, there's not, though we met, I'm forgetting, who did we meet in Gandhinagar? Right. So he did, there was 100 in the, because this bank was merged as State Bank of Saurashtra. So when State Bank of Saurashtra completed its 100 years, or 70 years, I'm forgetting what it was. So then a souvenir was written. But apart from that, there is not really a document where one can go and understand what is happening. So you have to really put all these records together. So obviously, couple of, how much time do I have? 5 minutes more? Okay. So this is all okay. This is about the state. Right. So again, as my experience or my background is very different from the backgrounds of others. I am trying to use all this information hidden in these hidden gems to understand what was it like to set up a bank in Bhavnagar. Right. So if you have to set up a bank, you need to have some economic activity. You need to understand what people were doing. So through these records, you begin to get a sense that this is the revenue of the state, and these are the exports imports, because largely Bhavnagar is near to it has these multiple ports. So from there you get a sense that the exports are extremely volatile and imports are much more stable. So it gives you a sense of the fact that because what they were exporting is based on the economic cycle around the world, whereas imports are all these necessary items which you need to import anyway. So you get a broad sense of the economic conditions in Bhavnagar. Now I know I'm boring most of you, but I'm just trying to tell you how we use archives to kind of build this kind of material. Next. Yeah. So this is something which is very interesting. That today, in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Economics was given to 3 scholars who studied banking. Okay. And in banking, one of the major things you study is bank runs. By bank runs, you basically mean that people, once they figure out that the bank is losing money and there's some rumor, or it could be a true rumor or it could be a false rumor, we don't know that, they start rushing for the deposits. So these scholars in their research basically pointed out how the banks manage bank runs and so on. And here's a very interesting case of Prabhashankar Patniji using, there was a concern around the bank's financial conditions at that time, and this is, I think, a picture of 1920s or something, or around that period. And people are all sort of worried about the bank deposits. And this person comes in, puts this table and puts this, the locker of the bank right there and asks people to withdraw whatever they want to withdraw, whatever their savings are. So in this way, you basically pass the information that the bank is stable. We have enough money. People who want to take the money can take the money. If you don't believe in and obviously a very prominent person standing behind the bank, it automatically puts confidence in people and the bank run is solved. So it's kind of very interesting when we were discussing this picture and the person in Gandhinagar was explaining to us, that this is how, so there's a larger role as the two archivists were telling us, the larger role of pictures, trying to put the plot together and, trying to make it a story. Because at the end of the day, it's all stories, right? I mean, you have to tell the story that how this, so for a banking person, sort of banking scholar, this was a very interesting case of solving bank runs. And I don't want to bore you because there's a lot of literature around bank runs, that how do governments and how do bankers. So all this material about Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank, we could kind of, next slide please. Next. Yeah, so there is some more information about workings of the bank. I don't want to bore you with that. Again, you get some information about the way the bank was growing in terms of deposits. Next. Yeah, so this is a very interesting slide on which we got the information that, not just Bhavnagar, but several other princely states were being loaned by this bank, right? So you have Panna, Bikaner, Bhavalpur, Alwar, several of these princely states, they were being sort of given loans by the bank. So it's also telling you that there's a larger role the Bhavnagar bank is playing in giving loans, not just to the Bhavnagar state, but also outside the state. And in that sense, helping them financially and so on. And obviously, one needs to have a more sort of a periodic information to have a larger story. But these snippets are very interesting, very exciting to understand what it was back then. Yeah. So I think I've run out of time. So I would want to end here. I mean, this is just another sort of a thing about the bank merging into State Bank of Saurashtra post independence, and there's a discussion with Sardar Patel around how the bank wants to be. So all this information is again weaves into the political history, where you're using bank as an instrument. That the bank evolved as a princely state bank. It shaped several other princely state banks, and then it post independence, as the state of Saurashtra is formed, the bank decides to agree to merge with State Bank of India as the first sort of and it became State Bank of India's associate bank, and then finally in 2008 it was completely merged into State Bank of India. And so the larger sort of a history of how the government uses, and this is a different sort of a government because it's a princely state, so how the princely state uses the bank to navigate through. So this is what one gets, and one is hoping to kind of develop more material, get more material and build on this. Because when we presented this paper, there were lots of economic historians. Professor Tirthankar Royal at London School of Economics expressed a lot of interest, and he said that you should use this to also understand other princely state banks as to how they were evolving and what they were doing, just to understand the differences in the way princely states. So history and archives lead to a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas, and I'm very happy to be here because we use these archives and to build on a very interesting paper, and we're just hoping that we can do develop this further and maybe produce another book going forward on this. Thank you.
Okay, I think first I'll thank you all for both, I think, keeping to time, but also sort of, I could see that the thoughts were building as you all spoke about, and sort of trying to respond to the questions one is trying to ask. Because I'm also aware of the fact कि हमने जो सवाल पूछे हैं वो इतने आसान नहीं है to answer them in a week or in a day kind of a presentation. But एक कोशिश के and I'm going to bring that question back sort of to all of us कि हम जब माइक्रो हिस्ट्रीज का हिंदी मुझे नहीं पता, so I'm going to mix it up with English words, but हम जब ये सूक्ष्म इतिहास, I don't know if the audience will know that समझते हैं, okay, so अच्छा भारतीय हैं तो सूक्ष्मता को समझते हैं. That's a beautiful thing you said. So when we're talking about these smaller micro histories, even the example that you gave, we are going deeper into a subject, right? It has come from your questions about the bank and then going inside a family history or an archive. My question comes back to, does it have a boomerang effect on the cities, on the banks today? अगर हम इंडस्ट्रीज की बात करें, आप कल्चर के साथ इतने इन्वॉल्व हो, एंड मैं आपसे कल भी फ़ोन पे यही बात कर रही थी, आप जो कल्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स को बढ़ावा देने के लिए इनिशिएटिव्स करते हैं, आपने पटनी आर्काइव्स को भी सपोर्ट किया, वो वापस आता है? आई एम रियली टॉकिंग अबाउट अ कार्मिक साइकिल ओवर हियर. डज इट कम बैक टू द सिटी इन एनी फॉर्म? It's development, it's future, it's present. Forget right now the future. In present times, are we seeing any implied, even in an indirect effect, कि ये करने से इतने सालों से, and I think because आपने इतने सालों से, I think almost 35 years of running or supporting cultural programs, have you seen something happen in Bhavnagar that sort of should make us believe that we should continue working like this for 35 more years?
मुझे लगता है कि मुझे लगता है कि ये मेजर नहीं हो सकता है, मगर सॉफ्ट में उसकी असर होती ही है. हमें विश्वास रखना चाहिए कि हमारी देने की निष्ठा है तो उसकी असर पहुंचती ही है. निष्ठावान जब भी हमारे रजवाड़ी राज कुटुंब थे, जैसे हमारे पटनी साहब थे, वो जो लोग करते हैं तो एथिकल वैल्यूज़ के साथ डेडिकेशन से कुछ करते हैं, ठोस काम करते हैं, उसको डायरेक्टली मेज़र नहीं कर सकते हैं कि उसका ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन कितना हुआ है. ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन अपनी ताकत से जितना देते हैं उतना होता ही है, उतना विश्वास रखना चाहिए.
सॉरी, इस बात को कहते साथ साथ आप ये बता सकते हैं कि आपने किस तरह के कल्चरल प्रोजेक्ट्स को सपोर्ट और इनिशिएटिव मतलब किया है, इनिशिएट किया है?
मुझे लगता है कि हम जो मटेरियल वर्ल्ड के लिए या जो भी कोई वर्ल्ड के लिए जितना भी कोई, मेरा काम है टू प्रमोट आवर इंडियन कल्चर एंड ethical values and to make people more disabled friendly and to make a better human. because अच्छा ह्यूमन होगा तो अच्छी सोच होगा, अच्छा कल्चर होगा तो उसकी सोच में अकेला मनी और मटेरियल नहीं होगा, उसके जीने की एक रीत भात देनी की चाहिए, सोच की रीत भात देनी चाहिए. और सोच का रीत भात के लिए उसको ऐसे इंडियन कल्चरल प्रोग्राम है, वो हकीकत में कल्चरल अकेला नहीं है, उसको सही ढंग में एक योग्य व्यक्तित्व बनाने का प्रोग्राम है. क्योंकि उसको सोच देने का काम करना है तो अपने इंडिया में भावनगर में आप 100 साल पहले भी जाएंगे तो मेरी जो फैबा थी उसको गोल्ड मेडल मिला था संगीत में, वो नंद कुंवर बा के हाथ से. मेरे फादर है ऑल ओवर इंडिया में घूमे हुए थे, कैलिको मिल में भी स्पिनिंग मास्टर थे, वहाँ भी मालूम था कि संगीत का प्रभुत्व क्या है. वहाँ भी मल्लिका साराभाई जी थी. उधर कलकत्ता गए थे, कलकत्ता कितने साल रहे थे. तो आर्ट एंड कल्चर शुड बिकम द ट्रू इंसाइट हमारा होना चाहिए कि आर्ट एंड कल्चर के बिना आदमी मानव नहीं बन सकता है. तो आर्ट एंड कल्चर को प्रमोट करना बहुत ज़रूरी है. इसीलिए वही सब्जेक्ट पर मैंने एम्फेसाइज 35 ईयर्स से करता हूँ. और मुझे विश्वास और श्रद्धा है कि उसको सही आदमी को सही मानस बनाना है, मानवी बनाना है, तो पहले प्रोएक्टिव समाज की ज़रूरत है. प्रोएक्टिव समाज तभी बन सकता है जब भी आर्ट एंड कल्चर इज इन्फ्यूज्ड इन द सोसाइटी.
Thank you. Nishit bhai ki baat se, I want to take off to. So basically, one of the things I want to clarify कि the way they presented, हमारे पास दो users हैं और दो makers of archives हैं. And this is where I want to highlight कि industrialist और a society member का रोल उतना ही important है जितना एक archivist का important है. So Saman, on that, your experience of building archives, I think even if you wanted to reflect back on you wanting to build the archive for Gwalior and the research that you were doing, and moving from there to the building of an archive with an institution, what role do different kinds of stakeholders play? And again, scaling it up to the sense of a city.
So I would start with building an archive for the city, which was Gwalior, which was termed as Gwalior Project. It was a princely state, and the largest stakeholders in such kind of where the history is extremely layered are too many. And when you as an individual or as a history student, or let's say history enthusiast in this context, are trying to build there are certain problems that you encounter before you even start building it. Now there are, of course, one knows what are the things that are required to be able to build an archive. So, important thing is first you collate the material and you understand the expansiveness of the material, that how much is it, how much would be called an archive, or what is an archive, what would constitute when I'm building an archive. Would my pictures of the cities that I've taken over the time can be called an archive, or would the papers that I've collected over to understand the princely history about the city would be an archive? So of course the thematic or the underpinning of what constitute an archives in terms of the objective is something which was important in terms of what I was doing for Gwalior. And of course not most of the material is in public domain. A lot of material is also with different stakeholders to bring that, and the idea was to bring everything together, which of course sort of is a huge task, and which is happening at the Patni archives now, that a lot of thing is coming together, and that and for that you require a lot of time, commitment, and a very clear vision, and also an understanding that it will evolve and your underpinning might change, but then the larger idea remains the same, that you still want to collate all that material. To come back to your point, it was definitely difficult, but one could do what one could do with the material they had, and they said this is what at the moment constitutes an archive for at least someone who's looking to understand what is happening in the city, be it papers that are available in the public domain, but there are 10 sources or multiple sources, but one could bring all that material into one place and say this is the not comprehensive but like a evolving nature of archives, which I think all the archives are. Now coming back to transitioning from that sort of an understanding of what one does when they are trying to create a it's a personal archive because it's a personal undertaking, but it's not something that I have been associated with in that sense. It's a city archive that I was trying to put together. Now coming back to now shifting that process to or expanding that understanding of what an archives is into an institutional archives is, there's a very different approach. There's a very different. Please let me know if I'm sort of diversifying or sort of. Making this question into a different thing. Just please pull me back into the question that is at hand. But the transitioning from making that sort of an archive allowed me what can be and what cannot be done when you transition into an institutional archive and making of an institutional archive. Which of course you're not new to. There are certain do's and don'ts which one has to of course follow, and also make sure that whatever is happening in that archives is, your personal objectivities and subjectivities takes a back seat. But in the personal archives that you're making, that sort of are revealed more often. So these are certain things that have been sort of continuous learnings, and you have to also unlearn that since this is not in personal archive, I cannot emphasize on one thing. Everything has to be put together as in this, everything needs to be given same emphasis. And because I am very involved in colonial papers, so I will put that first and let me complete that first. It doesn't happen in institutional archives. It is more important to have that sort of not singularity, but everything needs to be on the same plane. So that is one thing. What was the next part of that? There were two-part question.
The second part was at the city level, when you see both of these projects,
Yeah.
whether you have been able to use them to have a dialogue with.
So also your first question that you asked, I think there is certain sense of ripple effect that does happen, but it's too early to say that is it a tangible format that one can see what happens in the city. But what happens with these kind of projects is people get to know about it, people start talking about it, and they have this sort of an understanding that, okay, this is doable. Something like this can be done, something like this is possible, and there are people who are interested in associating themselves with these kind of things. So in terms of direct translation of what happens at the archives, or what an archives does, and what is existing at the archives, the continuous ripple effect, or the continuous actuality of it is not seen so prominently. It takes time, but what happens is it opens up a discourse, it opens up a space for people to get involved, and I think that's good enough as a starting point. Not good enough, but it's a good starting point to be able to have those conversations and participations with people. And it does take time for people to realize, I will also do this. It is doable, they have done it, I can approach them. And the openness and the sort of the word community comes together, and that is what becomes so important in this, and that is a kind of transformation that happens in the city, rather than much more tangible urban transformations, as to say. So I think that is something that it would be the comment at this point. But the sense of community and sense of community, in the sense that people come together who wants to do certain things, and there is this group formation, there is this formation of people who are who had an idea what is happening but are more confident. So a certain sense of confidence building also happens for people, like with the case of Patni Archives, I'm sure it's like a precedent for a lot of precedents. It sets a precedent for a lot of family legacies and archives to now say ki we have something like this, and this is something that is doable with the sheer passion and the commitment that we see now. So I think that sort of ripple effect does makes conversations in the city, and I think conversations is a good starting point for all of us to sort of have some effect, and we can consider conversations as to have a good and a greater impact. So and of course charcha leads to a lot of decisions and then more tangible effects. So it's only not the charcha, but also then effect of the charcha. So yeah, that's yeah.
Thanks, Saman. I think the reason I evoked Saman's previous project with Gwalior, one is the connection that Saman made with what we're doing at Patni Archives to bring in other collections and communities. But it's also to raise a question about the politics of an archive. And I think that's where I'm going to bring it back to your projects, both as very different kinds of users that you have been of an archive. And somewhere I think, Sonal, you did sort of hint at the politics of an archive. But these are archives which are already in an institution. And as Saman said, an archivist has sort of portrayed something about that archive which you're challenging. What role did people or public history or communities play in your projects? Any of you?
I think it's a very difficult question. We don't necessarily work with communities, but I think all three projects have community or people have been at the heart of all three projects. So like taking one from the other, the castle or Surat castle. So it's very interesting that you make this distinction between the user and the creator. But I think in our research work or in our projects and our public projects and all that, we are constantly creating an archive. Like the book becomes an archive because when I'm using the archive, I'm also using the books, I'm also reading it. And we are contributing, we are bringing that knowledge. So in the subversion, we are, whether it's the colonial archive or the building which is there, one thing which is very true for all these is that we are accessing something which is always available. To borrow your word, in plain sight, it's there. We didn't have to dig for it. It was there. And so there was a dominant discourse that the same thing was saying that this is the history. We are using the same thing to say, well, we read the same thing, but this is not the history, this is the history. And so the public engagement of it is in Surat. If anybody is aware of Surat, Surat does not hold its history on a very high horse. It lets go. It is like, and people make fun of it, that like chalta hai attitude type. But it's also shows the resilience and wanting to adapt and move forward. So what the castle did is that it brought back that anchor for the people to associate. And usually we play a movie at the beginning to like just bring people into the things, break it down, make it simplified and accessible to people. But at times I have seen like young children, youth, teenage, just talking and saying, हमको वो दीवार देखनी है जहाँ पे you can see the British and the Tughlaq thing. चल वो देख के आते हैं, हाँ. And then they are telling the person कि वो ईट का size ये था, ये mortar का size था and all that. So when we hear that, that's very gratifying, because what is happening is that something which was very elitist in terms of talking about architectural history is becoming commonplace. And that's a huge impact. The other impact, or like bringing, and this is something we don't have to, it's becoming, and the agency is with the people, that they are making their own histories by seeing what is this new building, which is becoming an archive. The second very interesting anecdote that I have from the same project is in one of the rooms, and this is not us, it is the Surat Municipal unka museum wala section. They displayed the Nawab ka seat and the portrait. Now this Nawab, he lives in Mumbai and he was visiting. He's like, all right, I'll go and see it. When he walked, and he was not even like aware that his grandfather's portrait is there. They were the ones, the Moin Mir, he's also written a book. So he belongs to that family who had gone and said, at the same time Wajid had gone, that we want the Nawabiyat wapis. And we are the soul. So they got it, Wajid did not get it. Because of the political reasons. But he got it, right? And that's very important. So when he's moving around, he's seeing the castle and all that, and he sees his grandfather's picture there. He literally had eyes in his, tears in his eyes. Like he was so like, this thing. And he said, I will give you a lot of my heirloom material, and it's totally in your care. Whenever you feel and wherever you would like to display it, it's all yours. So those kind of things, like what Saman and you and even the Patni archives, when there is a trust in the fact that somebody is going to take care of it, then they are able to, and also to see that here is now the moment that it can become public and more accessible to this thing. So they give a lot of their heirloom material, books and maps and so on and so forth for us to like display. So these kind of, things. And the other project is the Metro project, where something which is again in the archives and only, at some artists can do it, architects, but something which is very erasure of a building, like to bring it back into something which is more palpable and also approachable, simplified, glorified in terms of color, made like, fun to see, and put it on the station where people go past, is bringing it to the people. And we've seen numerous children getting photographed there. It comes onto the Instagram. It becomes like part of their lives, and it becomes normalized because you keep seeing it again and again. So you would remember every time you go to Ghikata, it's like, okay, there was a Metropolitan Court here, without actually having to say much. That. So I think in the using of the archive, you're also creating an archive and normalizing a knowledge which was not there. And then it is, it's also there for others to like come in and build on that. So
Thank you, sis.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is again, as Sonal said, it's a difficult sort of a question to understand because my experiences of using archives is sort of very different. I got into it not by design but by accident. As I was interested to understand why is it that banks are failing and why is it that there's so much chaos. So many of those questions led me to history and led me to understand. And it's again figuring out a lot of these things have just been pure accident. I mean, I happen to share this office space with Tana Trivedi, and Avni is just coming in to figure out what to do about these archives, and I hear that conversation between Avni and Tana and understand, oh, there's something about Bhavnagar. And then through these documents, we start. So again, I've not really had that sort of an exposure with figuring out the people sort of movement, unlike what Sonal but I mean, in a slightly different context, when I was trying to understand the South Canara banking history, when I kind of went into this region, I was extremely fascinated that how people were connected to these banks. And there's a deep connection because whoever I interviewed, all these bankers and so on, most of them were making this statement that every family in South Canara has benefited from these banks. Either we worked in those banks or we got loans from these banks. So and it's also very interesting that that's where politics perhaps comes in, where these banks were nationalized in 69 and 80. And despite being nationalized, when there was a movement under this that these public sector banks were merged a couple of years ago. So Vijaya Bank was merged with Bank of Baroda, and a Corporation Bank with Union Bank, and Syndicate Bank was merged with Canara Bank. Now, especially with Vijaya Bank, there were a lot of protests. So even though these banks were nationalized, and it's not the local community which was running these banks, earlier the local people were running these banks, but despite that, people had that fascination and saying that attachment that these are the guys, and how can we allow somebody from Baroda, I mean the Bank of Baroda, to take over, whereas both Bank of Baroda and Vijaya Bank were nationalized banks. They actually belong to the government, but even then there was some kind of a people association with it, and there were protests in Mangalore that you can't allow this sort of. So I found those stories to be very interesting, that as you were sort of saying, that does it come back in some way, these histories and so on and so forth. So in that region, yes. Similarly, when State Bank of Travancore was merged with State Bank of India, there were protests in Trivandrum. But similar protests, there were no such protests in other state associate banks. I mean, so let's say Indore or wherever there were state banks, like there was State Bank of Indore, State Bank of Patiala. They were also merged into State Bank of India, but there was no such protest in these regions. So it's telling you something different, that people perhaps associated more with their local community banks, and these banks apparently did much more for the local communities, and as a result, people still associate with them in some way. So I think maybe if we also in this Bhavnagar Darbar Savings Bank, we kind of go back and look at, but that's like long ago. I don't know. And maybe we can still find out whether people have some kind of attachment and some kind of things with the bank in some form. I don't know.
Yeah, we would also have to look it up actually.
Yeah.
If people protested when Darbar Bank was merged, that would be very fascinating. But I mean, your examples are quite relevant, from answering all the way about experiences and conversations to the relatability that we can generate for public or through public engagement or through community engagement sounds quite tangible, on ground kind of an effect, right? Because when you were talking, it's so fast. I mean, I'm just amazed that yes, people felt for banks or people feel for buildings which are lost and they want to experience them at a metro station rather than having these blank gray and white walls which evoke no emotion. And those are the most important parts of your days in a way. I have more thoughts and questions, but I also know that the audience has been very patiently listening to this conversation. So anybody wants to pitch in, ask anything? Yes, please.
I'm Adya Saxena, practicing historian and have been indulged since 2009 in digitizing the archival material. So we'll not talk about that, but resistance is there. Resistance is there in Bhavnagar also when the merger happened. Why resistance? Because this is a 21st century phenomenon. The merger is taking place in 21st century. We have to go back to 18th century. I am sure that when archives are into making and layers are being studied, we have to hunt for the material. I give you insight. Baroda state is fortunate, or Peshwas period is fortunate. Even Gwalior is very fortunate. Holkars are very fortunate because they were having the multilingual archival documentation practice. This is always there. Okay. We have it for 175 years, Hari Bhakti collection. This is in fact larger than what Tata Archives is having. And if you go layer by layer, what you are revealing, and I'm sure that such kind of material is in every princely state, they are talking about the villages, people's name, who is taking loan from whom, how the loan on the daily basis is given. When you are having this kind of material with you, which is generally taken by the historians abroad of no use, no economic historian has used that. If I start with Irfan Habib, and generally a student starts learning economic history, Cambridge Economic History of India 1, Tapan Ray Chaudhary and Irfan Habib. Cambridge Economic History of India. See, what you are preparing actually by these volumes, you are just preparing a new version of the Gazetteer. In 1880s, when colonizers are giving you a compendium that shows you this is how things happen. But it is for them, they wanted that things happen for them. But what about people? Here Patni Archives is having a discourse, not dialogue. Because I consider dialogue a negative word. Discourse is something which is ever generating. Okay, so we are getting into discourse with the people. Say for example, I have a girl Neha who is doing PhD, okay, on the cities of Gujarat. Okay, she is looking into Ahmedabad and Baroda. But she is doing a project with Hari Bhakti Center, cities of Gujarat. And Bhavnagar is an essential part of the project's study. Now, how the things can happen quickly. The Hari Bhakti collection is ready. You cannot ignore Bhavnagar state, but you cannot ignore the presence of the Baroda, because he was talking about Porbandars. He was talking about the ports, whether railways started, the ports started. Okay, so now you have to see that without the two, the aim of the colonizers will not get fulfilled, because they are looking for the agents, and these are the people who had been in trade and commerce. When the Patni family is taken as the mentor of the rulers, without naming, I'm getting into the political trajectory. Why these things are happening? Because of the acumen. Right? Acumen is very much there for generation together. A particular individual from that generation is taken into. Why that person is taken into? Because he has a connect with the community. And what we are learning today is that this continuous connect. Okay, and we are handing over to the community back, not to the family. Because one of my student, Kurtarth, is there. He asked, Madam, it is very focused. Why focusing is needed? because you have to start from a very small thing and you have to put these small points together. Then only the image is possible, what your LCD and LED machines are doing it. So historical rears, understanding the trajectories of the human civilization is the same process. So my answer to what Amol was saying, or to Sonal, or from Gwalior you are extracting, the simple thing is that if quickly we cannot reach out to what we are having, we have to reach out to the neighborhood. And in the neighborhood, you are having the bahis, the hundis, the chittis. The connection of the people is there, movement is there. So the connection with the community can be established, and a wonderful research paper can be first translated. The archival material that is used can be the part of your repository, of course, virtual repository. The sharing between the two archives can happen. Collaborative projects can start. It can happen with Indore, it can happen with Gwalior, it can happen with Nagpur. If we are just concentrating on the princely states which had evolved as a result of the resistance movement, right? In the period of the emergence of the successor states, that is post-Mughal or post-Aurangzeb period. So this is a humble summation, just adding to a question that really made me make a small intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Anyone else in the audience has any thoughts, suggestions, questions? Yes.
I have no questions, no suggestions. Just my personal thought process that I was going through. The two lady architects, what you were during while I was listening to you, I find that it's a total different learning I got today. Slightly familiar with architecture because of my cousins and nephews and all. But today is the moment, was a moment when I said, felt that, I mean, architecture is something different. You can learn a lot of things from there. The whole culture you can learn from there. And will not go to the detail what I learned today. Just one example that you said, that for learning any city or culture of a building, better go read the building rather than the book. I think that was a great learning. Thank you very much for that. One, with Amolji, yes, I'm slightly familiar with Darbar Bank saving and all. But what you have done, while Nisheeth Bhai was mentioning about business ethics and culture, the example of Sir Patni coming before the people, depositors, and said, come on, take it. Now, this is, I think, a historical event. And I think all bankers, the present bankers, the future, they should be enlightened with this. Just so very, very nice of you to mention that. One loving objection for both of you. You use the word 2-3 times, the word is boring. No. What you are telling, the boring, that is the root of what you are discussing and enlightening the people. So I was thinking that the water is there on the ground. Through the bore only you can take it out, what you have been taking out. So thank you very much, all the three. I have nothing to say about Nisheeth Bhai. We know each other so well that I don't want to speak anything about him. Thank you, Nisheeth Bhai.
In the meanwhile, if anybody has any other question, but I think I was going to put this point about boredom very differently. I know that someone herself is not getting bored. It's this perception of what the audience thinks this work does. And somewhere today, even just this one panel, and I think through the day what's going to happen, we are talking about how it's not boring. each project, each example of activating or using or making archives applied. And I'm realizing more and more through different discourses across different cities. The moment we're talking about activating or applying an archive, there is no sense of boredom even in the audience. So I think the audience is changing with us, and we don't need to worry that it is boring. Of course, there might be some parts of the research which would be too time consuming or overwhelming, but those are very different emotions altogether. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Bhagyashree Mehta, and it was pleasure to hear all of you. I would just like to interview in what you asked Mr. Nisheeth Mehta, that how this cultural thing has affected the city. So being a part of the family and coming to this city since just last 8 years, I have seen that when Nisheeth Mehta does any programs, there is a mixed audience. And very recently, we had Nisheeth Mehta ji and the Kalakshetra had organized a show of Mr. Rajendra Gangnani ji of Delhi and bringing that to Bhavnagar. So what happens is when the young kids, young aspiration dancers sees such performance, they realize what lies ahead. They get this exposure. So I think so that is the result of the cultural experience he has been giving to the Bhavnagar since last 38 years. And generation has after the generation has witnessed this, and they have somewhere or the other way, when they have chosen a cultural performed arts as a career, a very big role this part has played in their lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhagyashree. I think I can also add to this testimony myself. Sorry. When we started thinking about archives and sort of bringing it to the community last year, it was, even as an archivist and in this field for about a decade, this was perhaps the first time where I freely was able to connect with the idea when Avni said, let's do a cultural evening. As an archiving center or a regional center which looks into archives and histories, a center કલાકૃતિનું એક સાંજ ગોઠવે એ કેવી રીતે થઈ શક્યું, કારણ કે even though I still not attended, but Bhavnagar sort of gave me that vibe કે અહીંયા એ ચાલશે. અને I'm referring to, we had done something called Alap in January 2023, which was our soft launch of the oral history project, and one of the ways to start understanding the nerve of the audience. But for an archivist sitting on the other side to think of Ajito archive ready nathi, and are we ready to have a cultural evening, it was very easy for me to connect to the idea, because I could feel it in the air, the way people talked, that there is a sense of connection between history's culture and the everydayness of the people. With that, I just have one last question for you all. I think because every time you all spoke about it, what is coming about, there is a sense of values which we are building. And I'm going to be the devil's advocate over here, because we also talked about economics. Ane, the world around us is constantly asking us कि आमादी कितना मड़े, right? और किसमें से कितना मिलेगा? और हम ऐसा काम कर रहे हैं और करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं इतने सालों से जिसमें कुछ मिलता नहीं है. Even if one was to commercialize this project, kuch nahi milega. The turnover will be next to nothing. And that is where the word value or value system is becoming very important. And I'm not even trying to say that there's no audience for it. That's what I was saying earlier. There is an audience for this new value system. Isko hum is kaam se kaise samjhe? When we think about histories, using histories, preserving histories, bringing it back to a society or times today, jahan pe every hour, every square footage, every keyword in a computer is assessed against cost. What is this new value system that we are trying to generate? Or how has this value system helped you in the work that you're doing?
मुझे लगता है कि वैल्यू के बदले वैल्यूज की कीमत बहुत है, उसकी वैल्यू कर नहीं सकते हैं. इट इज अनकाउंटेबल, because that gives inner satisfaction, and by keeping your head up you can live the good life, and that is the most satisfactory things. And I am I am enjoying joy of giving, and that is because of the values only. I have already, on the basis of Karma Yoga, I am doing my job since more than 51 years. I am 75 at present, but I am enjoying doing the things with the values. Nothing to do here and there in values. Values can give you the true smile, true happiness, and it gives a इनर इंट्रोस्पेक्शन का चांस देती है। और हमें हमेशा हर एक व्यक्ति को अपना इंट्रोस्पेक्शन करना है, इनर इंजीनियरिंग करना है, तो वैल्यूज़ के साथ जीना चाहिए। और वैल्यूज़ आपको बहुत कुछ देता है, वो उसको उसकी वैल्यू नहीं कर सकते हैं।
Thank you. Any of you wants to add to?
I think it's a very important question, and in our experience, um, I'll talk with an example, and again coming back to Surat Castle ka example, we got the project in I think 2014. It did not start until 2015 because there was going to be a change of ownership. It was with the government of Gujarat and state government, but it was the SMC, the municipal corporation, who was very much invested in doing it. So they signed an MOU and they were like, "Yeah, all right, we'll have to change hands." And SMC said, "We'll raise the money and we'll do it. You just give us uh, the uh, the permission to do it." So it took a year for the transition to happen and the project to begin. Now, because we had a kida in our mind, because of our training and also the value system that our training instilled in us, that before beginning any project, you have to find out what was there, what it was like. So let's dig into the history, access the archives, and so on and so forth. So we already started doing it, and it was all on our time and on our money. When the project began, and I'm talking like very real things, so you have to tenderize everything. In any project, you tenderize it, and with the government, it's very difficult. Everything is measured and all that. Now, research is not measurable, and it's not tenderizable. So the tenderization never happens. So even in this project, it is more or less it happened on our money and on this thing, and mostly like the value system basically, which is like, exploiting the value system which has been instilled in us. Now, I am very hopeful, and this is also a answer to your previous question, the impact of such projects. I think at some point, if we as professionals have to further this importance of archival study, it has to be first demonstrated. And once it's demonstrated, then people then see the value that, hey, I mean, see, there will be, if it's not tenderizable, you don't have to do it. No, you can just start bringing the plaster down and paint it and all that. You don't have to do it. Or put the Wikipedia. It's just not required. And but because of the value system, because of the way you have been educated and all that, we thought it's important. But now we have been able to demonstrate. So it becomes, now we are in a better position, a more confident position to create a space for tenderization of the research component. And I think it's very important. It has to be formalized. Now, and so, I mean, the demonstration, I'm not saying that we have won the battle or something, but like it's a one step forward. We are in like a much better position. And I think these kind of conversations have to also lead to the fact that there has to be a formalization of these kind of, practices. So that's what, like, it's a struggle. We are in that, that moment of churning when these projects are becoming the public scholarship projects and all. They require these kind of practices, but they are not. And as you said, it's like very minimal. Even if they are happening, it's like far and few. It's on the margins. It's not normalized. It's not mainstream. So I think it has to be mainstreamized.
Do you want to add anything?
I mean, go ahead. So I think in a highly capitalist and consumerist society, it is very difficult. But two things. It is about building resilience and credibility, and that you do because you've been trained to look at the larger, or you look at the larger understanding of what comes next. And I think that's what gives you, or that's what feeds in. And of course, when one is resilient and knows that this is what passionate enough, but of course we all know passion doesn't pays the bill, but it's important to have that amount of resilience, and also honesty and faith in the work. And I'm not using these words loosely, but to know that this will give you back what you have put in. And then that is what the about values, what Nisheeth Bhai talks about, is important to have. And I think it's very difficult, it's very easy to say these things, but rather than do it. But yeah, and I see you, and I've and it you exuberate of resilience and the kind of credibility that you've been building. So, and setting and showing us with examples, it's something important, and then I'm sure it gives back in different means. So the idea that the understanding of what it is going to be, it keeps on changing, but that sort of clarity that it will sort of happen, and to cling on to that makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
Again, somebody who has been a part of this very capitalist world, because I've worked in this industry and financial industry and so on, and also teach the subject of economics, where one is always in this sort of a dilemma whether one should teach more history oriented courses. And this is a constant debate which happens within econ departments, that should you have more history oriented courses, philosophy oriented courses which build character and which make you think and so on, versus more market oriented courses which get you a job. So there's always this conflict uh, in a business school, in a management school, especially in an economics department, and those conflicts are always there. But you need some people out there to keep doing these things over a long period of time. And as Sonal was saying, that it has to be mainstreamized over a period of time. Obviously, it's not going to happen immediately. One has to be patient. But then I also see, though it's a very minority, I also see some students begin to understand these things, and they take this cause up. I mean, it's obviously much better than having nothing at all, right? So one just has to keep this effort going, and build more values over value. I think it's a cracker of a line. I'm going to use it. Hope sir does not copyright it. So, which means obviously. So yeah, I mean, I think it's something which one has to keep doing. History is extremely important. And all these years, I had this very interesting episode, which I'm now reflecting on. That when I was working in Mumbai in that fort area, there was this RBI's very interesting monetary museum right below my office, but I never saw it while I was working there, because nobody was telling me that there is something very important out there which used to be, but it's only in my sort of work I finally went again back there, and I said, oh, this is extremely fascinating. And there was my office there, but nobody was telling me to go and see these things. But today, having gone there, I now tell everyone to kind of go and see it. So it's that effort one has to keep doing. And over a period of time, one hopes that we have more such initiatives. And I think this is extremely fascinating because princely states history is very engaging. It's very interesting. There is so much to learn. So if I'm sure this is going to if we do it at a slightly more bigger scale somewhere over a period of time, I think more families will wake up, and we can then make it a movement of sorts going forward. Yeah.
I think one form of culture will change on the culture itself. I hope so. I think just summarizing. Yes. Okay.
Hi, I'm Soham from the Patna Archives team. So, speaking of the capitalistic scenario right now, and speaking of the mainstreamization of this process and these practices, uh, uh, my question would be to the uh, archives creators, more of the two lady architects there. that how much state intervention would you allow in such processes? Because it is very recent that we are seeing capitalistic or mainstreamization even in our questions. These practices used to be state sponsored for a very long time, right? Not only archiving, even the cultures, even the poets or the painters, they were being state sponsored. I recently went through, there was a very renowned poet, Dalpat Ram, must have heard. અને એમનો એક કાગળ હું વાંચતો હતો તો દલપત રામ ઇઝ ટેલિંગ સમબડી કે ફલાણા રાજ્યએ મને મહિને 200 રૂપિયા આપવાનું નક્કી કર્યું છે. So this is how the practices were running. So how much, at this point of time, how much state intervention would you allow in your practices?
And if I add to that, very recently, just to add to that example, very recently, Dalpatram Kavi's bungalow was taken down by the state only. I mean, one form of state authorities. A few years ago, 2-3 years ago, his bungalow has come.
I don't have an answer to how much agency. I mean, I don't think I have the agency to allow or disallow state. I have the agency to either subvert it or evade it. And I'll give you a very funny incident. I don't know, it's on camera. I hope it still remains. So, giving the example of this castle only, and I mean, it's like a lot of things that we did which were like totally not tendered, but then they wanted us to do an exhibition and they left it to us, like, you do what you have to do. So in the exhibition, I realized ki theek hai, there is like Surat has been written so much about in the colonial archives and not in colonial, well, the travelogues, European travelogues. It's immensely documented. So I was like, okay, let's just see what they have been writing. And very interestingly, this project was happening around the same time when there was a lot of controversy on eating preferences of people and things like that. So I found a little anecdote which was about that they said that you find the best meat in Surat. So I thought, and it was a very interesting thing. So I thought, let it be on one of the panels. And so I put that thing on the panel with like 200% faith that it's gonna get clearance because nobody is going to read it. And that is precisely what happened. So in the faith that nobody is gonna read it when they are like, seeing, and because it was a whole thappi of material that was going to go through, that got passed. So there are these moments of where you can evade. Like, I know we always not have the agency to like make the rules, but we can always like operate within that and see what is the narrative that we want to push. And I think that is more important. Also, I am like, still it is up because nobody reads, including the audience. And that is like, so that is another issue. But and some people read, and if they are reading, then that means they don't have any issue with that. So like some of the times you have to use these tactics to push push the narrative that you are interested in. And I think that is the agency that we have to identify within ourselves instead of like, fighting the big battle. But
I think along with the word tactics, I think the word risk is also as important. As practitioners, I think we've all become very safe, the usual narrative. But what you're talking about here is a risk, which you're taking because you know that narrative is important. I think it's time we start accepting those risks, including talking right now on a live platform about something like this. You want to add? Yes. But then I think we are in solidarity. That's something it's come up whenever such conversations, even if it's a different subject matter, whenever we have spoken about it, even though it's an intimate conversation, we have always felt that solidarity. कि 2 लोग करेंगे, 4 लोग और करेंगे, 5 लोग और करेंगे, we'll be able to push the envelope. So, hopefully.
Are we running out of time?
Yes, we have already run out of time.
Then we'll have that discussion.
Later?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Someone will answer your question later, Soham. Yes. No, I think we have run out of time. It's just that it will delay the whole day. I think Adya ma'am also has things to say, and we'll continue over lunch. The audiences, you'll miss it out a little bit, but we'll keep you all posted. We'll do our summaries of these conversations as well. For now, thank you very much. It was breezy and cold, but બધા બેસ્યા અને બધાએ સાંભળ્યું, and it makes us comfortable to talk about some of these very tense subjects very comfortably when the audience makes us feel so warm, including the online audience. And this was a very meta conversation that we started with. So stay along with us through the day where we're going into the depth of some of these questions and concerns. And we'll end it on a lighter note with a fun performance based on the family histories. Thank you very much to all our first set of panelists, and we'll continue at 2 p.m. Thank you so much.